German Chancellor Angela Merkel is due to visit a refugee camp in the Turkish border city of Gaziantep later on Saturday. Chancellor Merkel will be joined by European Council President Donald Tusk and the EU Commission Vice President Frans Timmermans. They will visit the city's Nizip district, which houses 15,000 Syrian refugees, with Turkey's Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu. This visit comes just 4 weeks after an agreement between Turkey and the European Union to stem the refugee crisis. Well, under the agreement, refugees who do not qualify for asylum in Greece will be deported back to Turkey. And in return, Turkey will receive financial support from the EU for refugees living in the country. Turkey has also asked for visa-free access to Schengen countries for its citizens. And the European Commission says that since the deal took effect, 325 so-called irregular migrants have been returned to Turkey, while more than 100 Syrians have been relocated from Turkey to Europe. Well, TRT World's Ediz Tiyansan is following the story from the southeastern Turkish city of Gaziantep with the border with Syria, and he joins us now. Ediz, what's the significance and the goal of this trip?
Well, Alijan, German Chancellor Angela Merkel is here essentially to assess and promote this latest deal between the European Union and Turkey. She's traveling along with top EU officials, namely Donald Tusk, the European Council President, and Frans Timmermans, who is the Commission's Vice President. They will be hosted by the Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu, and they're only expected to arrive later on in the evening after 1:13 GMT. And that's 4 p.m. local time. Their first stop will be the Nizip refugee camp just outside of Gaziantep, and later on in the evening they will come back to Gaziantep to participate in the opening of a UNICEF project for Syrian refugee children. And only after that we're expecting a press conference to get a better understanding of where we stand in the implementation of this deal. But this trip is certainly seen as a turning point in the implementation of this deal. Essentially, leaders are here to monitor the situation on the ground, to get a better understanding of the financial burden that Turkey is facing, with currently more than 2.7 million Syrian refugees inside their borders. And as you know, the deal entails an initial amount of 3 billion euros of payment from the European Union, a total of 6 billion euros by the end of 2018. That is in return for returning of all the migrants that didn't qualify for asylum in Greece. But don't forget, as Europe tries to contain this refugee influx on their borders, it's been subject to quite a lot of criticism in terms of the aspects of its humanitarian and legal aspects, honestly. And we've seen Merkel come out against it yesterday in a press conference where she said this deal is absolutely right and essential. But don't forget, she will also try to convince the Turkish side because, as you said, Turkey expects the lifting of visa requirements for its own citizens to travel freely inside Europe, and officials have repeatedly said that this entire deal could collapse if their demand isn't met.
Okay, now Ediz, you talked about this assessment and promotion during this visit. It was supposed to take place a couple of weeks ago, but was postponed for security reasons. What is the security situation there like now?
Well, certainly it's not just a financial burden, Alijan. Turkey is also seeing a threat directly on its national security. Especially we've seen it in the city of Kilis, where Merkel was initially expected to visit, but that's not going to happen. Maybe that's why we're anticipate the delay took place, because the city of Kilis, where the Syrian refugee population outnumber its own native Turkish population, has been asked to be a Nobel Peace Prize candidate for its hospitality, quote unquote, and they've actually extended a letter of invitation to Merkel herself. Now, she will not come to Kilis because this week probably was one of the most tense weeks for that city, some 4 or 5 kilometers next to the Syrian border. Just earlier this week, on Monday, a rocket fell on top of a 2-story building, killing 5 people, 4 among among them were Syrian children. And just yesterday, in the latest incident, we've seen 2 more rockets falling right in the city center, killing 2 more people there. And the total death toll from stray rocket fire just for Kilis itself has risen up to 13. So essentially, Kilis is directly is threatened by a rocket fire coming from across the border. And while Merkel will be visiting other towns outside of Kilis where the rocket range doesn't quite reach, it will be quite clear that even though these refugees have escaped to Turkey, in certain areas, both refugees and native Turkish population alike are still threatened by this conflict.
All right, Ediz Tiyansan joining us live from Gaziantep, looking ahead at the German Chancellor's visit. Thank you.